At 10:14 on a Tuesday morning, Robert Hayes gripped the edge of his kitchen counter so hard his knuckles turned white. 1 second he was reaching for his coffee. The next, the room tilted, his knees dissolved, and the floor rushed toward him like a trapdoor opening beneath his feet. He did not faint. He did not black out. He simply felt his body stop cooperating, as if some invisible hand had turned the dial on his energy all the way down. When his daughter checked his pulse, she counted again, because the number felt impossible. 46 beats a minute. Robert was 72, but this was not just age. For almost 5 years, Robert had done everything right. He took his blood pressure pill every morning before breakfast. He trusted the routine, because routine felt safe. This was a man who had spent 30 years as a postal worker in Ohio, walking routes through weather that would send younger people back indoors. He was not careless with his health. He was the kind of person doctors hope for, the kind who follows directions exactly. That was why what happened next was so disturbing. His discipline was not protecting him. It was hiding the problem. 8 months earlier, his daughter Emily had started noticing little changes that did not fit the man she knew. Robert had always walked 3 miles before the sun was fully up, but now he was back in his recliner before late morning, drained by a fatigue that seemed to arrive from nowhere. He stopped wandering the aisles of the hardware store on Saturdays. He waved off family cookouts. He told his grandkids he would watch them play instead of joining them in the yard. Everyone around him used the same explanation, because it sounded reasonable and gentle. He is getting older. But reasonable can still be wrong. That is the dangerous thing about medication side effects in older adults. They rarely arrive with fireworks. They arrive disguised as normal aging. A little more fatigue here, a little more dizziness there, a slower recovery after standing up, a day when your ankles seem tighter in your shoes, a morning when climbing the stairs feels strangely expensive. Piece by piece, the body sends clues, and piece by piece, those clues are explained away. By the time someone recognizes the pattern, it may have been building for months. That is why the question in front of us matters so much, especially if you or someone you love is over 60. Between amlodipine and metoprolol, which one is actually safer for an aging body? Most people assume there must be a simple answer, the way people assume there is a single best car, a single safest neighborhood, a single smartest financial move. But medication does not work that way, and blood pressure medicine especially does not work that way in later life. The question is simple, but the truth behind it is not. Before we compare the two medicines, you need to understand one principle that changes everything. The body at 72 is not the body at 52 wearing older skin. Arteries gradually stiffen. The nervous system reacts less quickly to sudden drops in pressure. The liver and kidneys may clear medication more slowly, which means the same dose can linger longer and hit harder. Even the heart can become more sensitive to medicines that slow its rhythm. That does not make aging fragile by definition, but it does mean prescribing for older adults requires more precision than many people realize. Now hold that thought, because it explains why two people can take the same tablet and have completely different lives on it. One person feels steady, protected, and normal. Another feels foggy, swollen, exhausted, or unsteady, and neither response means the medicine is universally good or universally bad. It means the match between drug and body is either right or wrong. That is the part too many patients never hear. They are told what to take, but not why this medicine was chosen instead of the one sitting right beside it on the pharmacy shelf. And that missing explanation is where confusion starts to grow. Amlodipine and metoprolol lower blood pressure through very different paths. Amlodipine is a calcium channel blocker. In plain English, it helps blood vessels relax and widen, reducing resistance so blood can move more easily. Metoprolol is a beta blocker. It works more directly on the heart, reducing how hard and how fast the heart beats, which can lower blood pressure and also protect a heart under strain. If that sounds like a technical distinction, stay with me, because buried inside it is the reason one medicine may restore daily life for one older adult and quietly drain it from another. This is where the stories begin to split. For someone whose main problem is uncomplicated high blood pressure driven by stiffening arteries, a drug that relaxes blood vessels may make more sense. For someone with a history of heart attack, certain rhythm problems, or heart failure, a drug that reduces the heart's workload may be doing far more than lowering a number on a cuff. Same goal on paper, completely different job in the body. Once you see that, you can never unsee it. The real story becomes the reason the bottle was chosen. So if Robert's pulse sank to 46, was the medicine itself the problem? Or was the problem that the medicine no longer matched the body taking it? And if amlodipine often causes ankle swelling, while metoprolol can leave people feeling slowed to a crawl, how does anyone decide which risk matters more? The next step is where this conversation stops being abstract and becomes personal. Because once you understand exactly how each drug works inside an older body, you start to see why the wrong prescription can feel like aging overnight, and why the right one can feel like getting years back. What happens next depends on details people miss. Amlodipine sounds technical, until you picture what it is really doing. Every artery in your body has muscular walls. When those walls stay tight, blood has to push harder to get through. That pressure shows up on the cuff around your arm, but it also shows up where the stakes are much higher, in the brain, the heart, the kidneys, and the eyes. Amlodipine helps those vessel walls relax. When the vessels open wider, blood meets less resistance, the pressure falls, and the heart does not have to push against such a stubborn system. That simple shift is one reason the drug is used. In older adults, that mechanism matters even more because aging changes the blood vessels themselves. The top blood pressure number, systolic pressure, often becomes harder to control as arteries lose some of their flexibility. Instead of expanding easily with each heartbeat, they act more like rigid tubing. That rigidity can keep systolic pressure elevated, even in people who do not feel sick. It can also raise the risk of stroke, heart attack, and kidney damage over time. A medicine that directly relaxes vessels can be especially useful when the problem is less about an overactive heart and more about stiff, resistant circulation. That is why amlodipine has earned a strong place in treatment plans for many older adults with uncomplicated hypertension. It does not usually slow the heart the way beta blockers can. It does not depend on making every heartbeat weaker. Instead, it changes the path blood has to travel. Think about the difference between forcing a pump to work harder and simply widening the pipe. Both can lower pressure. One does it by pushing less. The other does it by resisting less. Now imagine a 68-year-old woman named Linda Brooks. She lives alone, drives herself to church, watches her grandsons twice a week, and hates any medication that makes her feel foggy. Her main problem is high blood pressure, with no history of heart attack, heart failure, or major rhythm trouble. Her doctor, Dr. Sarah, chooses amlodipine because the goal is straightforward: lower pressure in a body with aging vessels without unnecessarily slowing a heart that is already doing its job well. For someone like Linda, that choice can work well. But even a good fit can carry a price. The most common complaint with amlodipine is swelling, especially in the ankles and feet. For many people, that side effect seems almost unfair because the medicine may lower blood pressure beautifully while making the lower legs feel heavy by late afternoon. Shoes fit tighter, socks leave deeper marks, walking becomes a little less comfortable. The reason is not that the kidneys are suddenly failing. It is that the medicine relaxes arteries more than veins, which can encourage fluid to collect in the lower body. That detail matters because swelling feels alarming, and people often fear the wrong cause. Amlodipine can also cause flushing, dizziness, headaches, palpitations, and fatigue. Not everyone gets them. Some people never notice anything beyond lower numbers at the doctor's office. But for others, the first week or two can feel like a negotiation between benefits and annoyances. That is one reason starting low and watching closely matters, especially in older adults who may already be balancing several medicines. A blood pressure drug does not have to be dangerous to be disruptive. Even mild dizziness can become a serious problem if it shows up when someone is stepping off a curb, walking to the bathroom at night, or standing too quickly. There is another layer almost no one talks about until something goes wrong: interaction. Amlodipine is processed through pathways in the liver that other drugs can affect. Some antifungal medicines, some antibiotics, certain HIV medications, and even grapefruit juice can change how much of the drug remains in the bloodstream. More drug lingering in the system can mean more swelling, more dizziness, and more fatigue. In a younger person, the body may absorb that change without much drama. In an older adult already taking multiple prescriptions, that same shift can turn a manageable medicine into a daily nuisance or a genuine fall risk. Still, none of that means amlodipine is unsafe by default. It means amlodipine is a tool, and tools work best when used for the right job and checked for wear. When the main challenge is persistent high blood pressure without a strong cardiac reason for a beta blocker, amlodipine often makes clinical sense. Many guidelines continue to favor long-acting dihydropyridine calcium channel blockers like amlodipine among first-line options for hypertension, especially because they can be effective for older adults and are commonly used when systolic pressure is the main concern. But first-line does not mean hands-off. It means chosen thoughtfully, then monitored honestly. That distinction can change a person's entire experience. If Linda develops ankle swelling after 6 weeks, the answer may not be panic. It may be a dose adjustment, a medication review, a conversation about timing, or a different treatment plan altogether. What matters is that the swelling is recognized as a medication issue and not dismissed as simple aging, salt intake, or weak circulation. Once people understand that, they stop blaming themselves for symptoms that arrived after a prescription did. They begin asking a better question. Is this medicine helping me in the way it was supposed to help me? And that leads to the next problem few patients are prepared for. Amlodipine tends to get judged by what it does to the ankles. Metoprolol gets judged by what it does to energy, pulse, and stamina. But when a medicine acts directly on the heart instead of the blood vessels, the risks and rewards change shape completely. The same effect that protects one person's heart can make another person feel as if someone quietly replaced their body with a slower, heavier version. That is where this comparison becomes much harder, because once the heart enters the story, the rules are no longer the same. Metoprolol enters the story from a different angle. If amlodipine is mostly about relaxing blood vessels, metoprolol is about quieting the heart's response to stress signals. The heart has beta receptors that respond to adrenaline and related chemicals. Those signals can make the heart beat faster and contract more forcefully. Metoprolol blocks part of that message. The result is a slower heartbeat, less forceful pumping, and often lower blood pressure. But that description is only half the story, because lowering blood pressure is not the only reason this medicine exists. In some people, metoprolol is less a pressure drug than a protective shield. That difference matters because beta blockers are often misunderstood. Someone hears that a medicine lowers blood pressure and assumes it belongs in the same category as every other blood pressure tablet. Clinically, that can be misleading. Metoprolol is commonly used for several heart-related conditions, including after certain heart attacks, in some cases of heart failure, and for certain rhythm problems. In those settings, the medicine may be helping the heart survive stress, reduce oxygen demand, and stay in a safer rhythm. The medicine is treating a broader cardiac problem. Picture a 70-year-old man named Daniel Mercer. A year ago, he had a heart attack that left his heart weaker than it used to be. He gets winded climbing stairs he once took 2 at a time. He is frightened by every skipped heartbeat. When Dr. Sarah prescribes metoprolol, the choice is not just about getting his pressure down. It is about lowering the strain on a heart that has already been injured. For Daniel, slowing the heart can be protective. It can reduce oxygen demand. It can lower the chance of dangerous rhythm trouble. It can be the difference between a stressed heart and a more stable one. That is why any comparison between amlodipine and metoprolol becomes distorted when people ignore the reason for the prescription. If the only question is which drug looks cleaner on paper for straightforward hypertension in an older adult, beta blockers often do not lead the conversation. But if the question becomes which drug serves an older adult who has already had a heart attack or is living with certain forms of heart failure or arrhythmia, then metoprolol may move from optional to central. Clinical context changes everything. And now we get to the part many families first notice at home. Metoprolol can make people feel slower. Sometimes it is profound enough to frighten people who used to feel energetic. They describe a heaviness, a flattening, a sense that their body takes longer to answer every request. Walking feels less springy. Morning routines take more effort. Exercise tolerance shrinks. Some of that effect may improve as the body adjusts. Some of it may not. In older adults, especially those already close to the edge of fatigue, the change can feel less like treatment and more like a personality shift. A slow heart rate can also become more than an inconvenience. When the pulse drops too low, the body may not deliver enough blood flow to meet the moment, especially when standing up quickly, climbing stairs, or recovering from exertion. That is when dizziness, lightheadedness, near fainting, or true fainting can appear. A person who seems merely tired may actually be underperfused. A person who seems simply older may actually be overmedicated. That is the trap. Families assume decline. Patients assume weakness. Sometimes the body is not declining at all. Sometimes it is obeying a drug too well. Then there is the issue people rarely hear until after the prescription begins. Metoprolol should not be stopped suddenly without medical supervision. When the body has adjusted to a beta blocker, abrupt withdrawal can trigger rebound symptoms, including a surge in heart rate, a rise in blood pressure, worsening chest pain, or other serious problems. That does not mean the medicine is dangerous by nature. It means it has consequences powerful enough that the exit requires planning. For some people, the idea that a medication cannot simply be dropped is shocking. But that is exactly why understanding the medicine before trouble starts matters so much. Metoprolol can also become more complicated in people with breathing issues. Although it is more selective than some older beta blockers, caution may still be needed in people with asthma or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. It can interact with other medicines that affect heart rate or blood pressure, and when several of those are stacked together, the pulse can drift lower than anyone intended. Add age-related changes in metabolism, add fatigue from other illnesses, add a long medication list, and a once reasonable dose can start behaving like too much. No one tablet creates the whole problem. The combination creates it. None of this means metoprolol is the villain of the story. In the right patient, it can be a valuable medicine. For someone recovering from a heart attack, living with selected rhythm issues, or needing a heart failure strategy that includes a beta blocker, it may be doing work amlodipine cannot do. The mistake is not prescribing metoprolol when it is indicated. The mistake is treating it like a generic, interchangeable blood pressure pill when the heart-specific reasons for using it have not been made clear. When patients do not know why a medicine was chosen, they cannot recognize whether its burdens still match its benefits. So if a patient says, "I feel exhausted all the time," what is the real question Dr. Sarah has to answer? Is the fatigue an acceptable trade-off for vital heart protection, or is it a sign that the treatment plan needs to be revisited? And if the pulse is running in the 40s or low 50s, when does caution become urgency? This is where side effects stop being abstract lists on a pharmacy leaflet and start becoming the hidden language of everyday life. The next step is learning how those side effects collide with other drugs, other diagnoses, and the silent math of aging bodies. Here is where the comparison becomes more unsettling, because neither drug acts alone once it enters a real older adult's life. It enters a crowded system. Blood pressure medicine may share space with cholesterol pills, diabetes drugs, acid reducers, sleep aids, inhalers, pain relievers, blood thinners, thyroid tablets, supplements, and whatever was added during the last urgent care visit. Together, they create a chemistry set nobody can understand by glancing at a single bottle. That is why a medicine can feel safe on the prescription pad and completely different after a few months in an actual body. Start with amlodipine. Because it relaxes blood vessels, it can already tilt some people toward dizziness, flushing, or lower leg swelling. Add another blood pressure medicine. Add an antibiotic that affects drug metabolism. Add grapefruit juice as a breakfast habit. Add dehydration after a stomach bug. Suddenly, the person who had tolerated the medicine reasonably well now feels wobbly walking from the couch to the kitchen. But inside the body, the equation changed. The line between manageable side effect and meaningful risk can be surprisingly thin, especially in someone who already has arthritis, balance issues, or a history of falls. Now look at metoprolol in the same real-world way. On its own, it may slow the heart enough to help. Combined with other drugs that also affect pulse or blood pressure, it can push a person farther than anyone intended. Fatigue deepens. Exercise tolerance disappears. Lightheadedness becomes a routine part of standing up. A heart rate in the 50s can be acceptable for one patient and a warning sign for another. A heart rate in the 40s may be tolerated by a well-trained athlete, but in a 75-year-old who feels weak and nearly collapses in the kitchen, that number tells a very different story. Context turns data into meaning. This is why medication review matters more than medication memorization. The more important question is whether anyone has stepped back and examined the entire list as one system. Not three specialists, each protecting one piece of the map. Not a rushed refill based on what was prescribed years ago. The changes in stamina, balance, swelling, sleep, appetite, and pulse. Older adults do not usually run into trouble because one medication is evil. They run into trouble because nobody pauses long enough to see how several reasonable choices are interacting inside one aging body. Consider a fictional patient named Carol Bennett. She is 71 and takes medicine for high blood pressure, reflux, cholesterol, osteoarthritis pain, and a recent fungal infection. 2 weeks after starting a new treatment from urgent care, she notices her ankles are puffier by evening and she feels a little dizzy getting out of bed. She assumes she is tired and may be eating too much salt. What she does not know is that her new medicine may be increasing the level of another medicine she already takes. But when the system is fragmented, side effects can look like mystery, and mystery can look like aging. Or take another patient, Raymond Cole, age 74. He has high blood pressure, a history of atrial arrhythmia, and a medication list long enough to fill half a page. His pulse has gradually drifted lower over 6 months. He now avoids walks because he feels oddly drained, but he tells nobody because he assumes he should be grateful to be alive. When his daughter checks his pulse and finds it at 48, the family is shocked. Raymond is not lazy. He is not imagining things. He may be experiencing the cumulative effect of multiple drugs that all pull in the same direction, each one justified, but together, too much. This is the underappreciated danger in senior care. The body does not experience prescriptions one at a time. It experiences them as a chorus. Some become so loud together that the original intention is lost. That is why even the question of safety has to be reframed. Safer than what? Safer for whom? Safer under what diagnosis? Safer with which other medications already on board? Safer at what dose? Safer at age 62 or age 82? The more specific the question becomes, the more useful the answer becomes. This is also the point where patients often feel intimidated, because the whole thing sounds too complicated to challenge. But asking for clarity is not challenging. It is participating. If swelling starts after a new prescription, that matters. If fatigue becomes life-changing, that matters. If a once active person suddenly fears stairs, naps twice a day, or grips the counter after standing, those are not random lifestyle details. They are clinical clues, and those clues deserve translation. Patients do not need to speak in textbook language to deserve careful answers. They need to describe what changed and when it changed. That alone can be enough to reshape a treatment plan. The hardest part is that medication-related decline often happens slowly enough to train everyone around it. Families adjust expectations little by little. A shorter walk becomes no walk. An afternoon nap becomes the whole morning gone. A skipped errand becomes a stopped hobby. The body whispers before it shouts, and those whispers are easy to absorb into the story of aging. By the time someone recognizes the pattern, months may have passed. That is exactly why side effects tied to blood pressure medicines can be so deceptive in older adults. So the next time someone says a blood pressure medicine is safe, the real question is whether it is safe in isolation or safe in reality. Isolation lives in textbooks. Reality lives in kitchens, pill organizers, grocery aisles, nighttime bathroom trips, and the moment when someone stands up and wonders why the room just shifted. And once you start looking at these drugs in the real world instead of the abstract, one question becomes unavoidable. If the experts know all this complexity exists, what do the guidelines actually tell doctors to do? And why do so many patients never hear that explanation clearly? Once you reach the guideline level, one myth dies quickly. Experts do not treat all blood pressure medicines as interchangeable for older adults. Major hypertension guidance continues to place long-acting calcium channel blockers like amlodipine among first-line options for many people with hypertension, alongside other established first-line classes. Beta blockers, by contrast, are usually not the opening move for uncomplicated high blood pressure alone, unless there is another compelling cardiac reason to use them. It means the why behind the prescription matters as much as the name on the bottle. Without that why, patients are left guessing. That is why the most important conversation in the room is often not, "What am I taking?" but, "What problem is this specific medicine solving in me?" If the answer is simply high blood pressure and the patient has no strong heart-related indication for a beta blocker, then one kind of treatment discussion follows. If the answer is prior heart attack, angina, heart failure, or a rhythm condition, the discussion changes immediately. That distinction can transform confusion into partnership. Now imagine two patients sitting in separate waiting rooms at exactly the same time. Megan Foster is 69. Her main problem is persistent systolic hypertension. She has no history of heart attack, no heart failure, and no arrhythmia that requires rate control. Across town, Thomas Reed is 73. He has hypertension too, but he also carries the history of a prior heart attack and episodes of rapid heart rhythm. If both patients walk out with the exact same prescription, would that make sense? Maybe. But if both leave without understanding the reason, something essential has already been lost. The name of the drug matters. The reason matters more. This is where overly aggressive treatment can become its own danger. Lower numbers are not automatically better numbers if they come at the cost of repeated dizziness, falls, exhaustion, or reduced blood flow to organs in a frail older body. Good care is not just about chasing the lowest possible reading. It is about matching targets to the patient standing in front of you. An active 65-year-old without major frailty may tolerate one strategy beautifully. The skill is not merely lowering pressure. The skill is lowering pressure without quietly lowering life. That changes everything again. So what should a patient actually ask at the next appointment? Start with the question most people never think to ask. Based on my health history, is this the medicine you would choose if we were starting fresh today? That question is powerful because it forces the prescription to justify itself in the present, not just survive on inertia from the past. A drug chosen 5 years ago may still be perfect. It may also be outdated for the body living with it now. Age changes. Diagnoses evolve, new medicines get added, side effects accumulate. What was once sensible can become questionable without anyone making a dramatic mistake. The second question is just as important. What side effects would matter enough for you to want a phone call? Not vague side effects, specific ones. Swelling in the ankles by evening. A pulse consistently in the 40s or low 50s. Dizziness after standing. A new need for naps. Shortness of breath during ordinary activity. Fatigue so strong it changes behavior. When patients know exactly what to watch for, they stop waiting until a problem becomes frightening. They stop assuming symptoms are irrelevant. They recognize that side effects are part of the treatment story, not a separate inconvenience they are expected to tolerate in silence. The third question may be the most protective of all. Has my complete medication list been reviewed for interactions and cumulative effects, including supplements and recent prescriptions from other doctors? That question sounds simple, but it can uncover the hidden architecture of risk. Amlodipine may be fitting the patient poorly because another medication is raising its level. Metoprolol may be hitting harder because another drug is also slowing the heart. Sometimes the answer is not choosing between two medicines, as if one must be the hero and one the villain. Sometimes the answer is discovering that the real problem sits in the overlap, not the individual pill. Then comes the fourth question. What is my actual blood pressure goal, and why is that the right goal for someone my age and condition? Many patients know their numbers, but not their target. They hear good or a little high without ever learning the reasoning behind those words. But targets shape decisions. Targets determine whether a dose is increased, held, or reduced. Targets influence whether side effects are tolerated or treated as unacceptable. When a patient understands the goal, the process stops feeling arbitrary. It becomes understandable. And once it becomes understandable, fear loses some of its power. Mystery shrinks when language gets clear. Finally, ask the question almost nobody asks soon enough. When should we reassess whether this medication is still the right fit? Not whether the refill is due, whether the match is still right. That is a different conversation. It recognizes that successful treatment is not a one-time decision frozen forever. It is a relationship between a changing body and a changing plan. That relationship needs review, especially after hospitalizations, new diagnoses, new prescriptions, unexplained fatigue, swelling, falls, or major shifts in routine. Patients are not difficult for asking. They are participating exactly the way good medicine hopes they will. And that brings us back to the question that started all of this. If guidelines often favor amlodipine or similar first-line options for straightforward hypertension and reserve beta blockers like metoprolol for more specific cardiac reasons, why do so many older adults still end up confused about which medicine is safer for them personally? The answer is not hidden in a package insert. It is hidden in a conversation many people never get, the one where a doctor explains not only what the medicine does, but what the medicine is asking the patient to trade in return. So what happened to Robert Hayes after that morning in the kitchen? The answer was not dramatic in the way people imagine medical turning points should be. There was no overnight miracle, no grand speech, no single brilliant test result that changed everything in an instant. What changed Robert's life was something quieter and, in a way, more powerful. His daughter insisted on a full medication review with Dr. Sarah. Not a quick refill visit, not a rushed blood pressure check, a review. Every diagnosis on the table, every medication in the pill organizer, every new symptom laid out in order, from the first afternoons of unexplained fatigue to the day his legs nearly gave out beneath him. That sequence mattered. Once the timeline was visible, the pattern was harder to ignore. The slower pulse, the reduced stamina, the drifting energy, the shrinking world around him, none of it had happened at random. Dr. Sarah looked at the reason Robert had originally been prescribed metoprolol and compared it with the man sitting in front of her now. His heart history did not demand the same strategy it once might have suggested. His current symptoms carried real weight. His other medications added context. Suddenly, the question was no longer, has he been taking his pill faithfully? The question became, is this still the right pill for the body and life he has today?